and welcome to baking. I'm Jack.
I'm Paul.
And this week, I think Paul's going to make some lovely white bread. He's going to say so himself.
And hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of baking. Today we're going to make some lovely white bread. And later on we'll be preheating the oven to 220 or gas mark 7. Let's get going.
So, as usual, you're going to see Paul wash his hands here. He's going to talk about washing his hands, but he's muted.
There we
Head
go.
over to the sink.
Let's go and wash our hands before we start cooking.
Remember to follow all the correct hand washing procedures.
Yeah. And even if we didn't have coronavirus, we'd still have to wash our hands as health and safety.
Yeah, it's important that you're not
Food
getting
hygiene.
any germs in the food and making anyone
Always
unwell.
wash your hands before you cook.
Get your fingers all around, in between each other. Make sure everything's nice and clean.
Wash.
Almost done. Clean the wrist and you dry them off camera. So here we are, we're ready to go. What have we got first?
First of all, we've got our pan.
Brilliant.
Then we grab our butter. We're just going to get the right measurements of what we're going to use.
Cool. So we're putting the pan on the scale and zeroing it so that we're not weighing the pan, we're just weighing how much butter we're putting in the pan.
Get a knife to cut your butter to make it easier.
Now we are going to melt our butter on the cooker, on the gas, but if you aren't confident with that or it's not safe for you to do that, you can melt it in the microwave. Just make sure you don't microwave it for too long.
Yeah, short bursts.
Just let it melt down. And the same with the cooker, you don't want to heat it for too long because you don't want to burn it, you just want it to become runny and yellow.
See, classic me, I weighed it out, I measured it wrong, so I had to start a little bit again. Sorry about that.
There we go, butter's out of the way.
There we go. Get rid of the scales, grab your pan, take over, not yet.
Get your spatula and take it straight over to the stove.
There we go.
And moments later,
Once it's melted,
you're going to walk back into shop with some lovely melted butter. It takes a little
there
bit.
we go.
Here we go. So you'll see,
You also want to let it cool, you don't want it too hot.
you can see it's just runny and yellow. You don't want it to go brown, you don't
That's
want to
what you
burn it at all. If you did burn the butter, we'd recommend starting again. Wash the pan out and start from fresh.
It's all good bitter, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And here's your bowl with your ready measured flour.
I've already measured this out to make it quicker. So I think
we'll
it was
show you on
450 of flour.
We're going to show you on the scale anyway.
What we made, yeah.
So remember, put your bowl on the scale, zero the scale with the bowl on, and then weigh out your flour.
There we go. I think it should be 450 of flour.
We're going to see now.
My memory serves me correct.
I think we're going to see now. I'm not. Why am I not?
There's the ready weight. 2 teaspoons of
Yeast.
yeast.
You were using instant ready, easy action yeast, weren't you?
Yeah. Just because it's easier.
But if you weren't, you'd have to activate it. And so now you're putting your salt off to one side, away from the yeast, to avoid it killing it. And then you're just using a fork to combine the ingredients.
Yeah. You want to combine your dry ingredients.
Cool. But so if you're not using easy action or instant action yeast, make sure that you activate it by putting it in some warm water with some sugar or honey before you actually add it to your mix.
Yeah.
But easy action's pretty easy to get hold of, and we recommend it's a lot easier.
Also, the reason I put the salt and the yeast from opposite ends is to stop it from touching, because the salt will kill the yeast.
Yeah.
So you don't want to do that. So then you add your butter, you melt the butter into the flour.
In a pinch, you could use vegetable oil, but melted butter just adds a nice richness.
This is a Paul Hollywood recipe.
Next, we've got our room temperature water.
Yeah.
Not cold, not hot.
You just want it to be able to put your hand in and it to be the same temperature. So you don't want to feel any cold, you don't want to feel any heat.
Cool. And we like using a fork here to combine the dough. It's something that we actually discussed when we were making bread in the first lockdown.
Yeah.
We found the fork, it's easy to get the dough off and it's easy to kind of combine.
I think it was actually your technique. I used to use a spoon and you said, why don't you try a fork?
I wasn't going to take the credit.
I know, but I think it was originally you put me onto the fork technique, and I actually like it. I think it's easy.
It just slips off there.
Yeah, it's nice and easy.
So what are we looking for at this stage? Are we looking for a shaggy ball of dough? Are we looking to
So what you want to do is just bring it together with your fork,
and then it's almost ready for you to get your hands in and get the rest of it, because if you put your hands in too early, it's too sticky and it gets stuck on your hands.
Right.
You don't want that. That's why you use a fork.
So once it starts to form a big lump,
Yeah, once you're
ready
starting you're seeing the water's like incorporated with the flour and the sugar, well, the salt and everything that's in there. At that point, you're ready to go in with your hands and start combining everything else, and then tipping it out onto the work surface.
remember this should be a clean work surface that you're tipping out onto, or a
Absolutely.
chopping board you've got clean.
Make sure it's all nice and clean before you start.
And you can see all those little shaggy bits. You're going to fold them into the middle just to combine them with the dough.
So now you're just wanting to work your hand with your, work your dough with your palm.
You should already be able to smell lovely yeasty bread smells at this point.
Just keep on folding it over itself and using your palm to just dig it in and stretch it.
Give it a good knead.
You want to try and to stretch the dough.
So how long are we
So it
kneading
gets
for
elastic.
on average? We're saying about 10 minutes.
10
right?
minutes.
So this is a good arm workout.
I
You're
actually-
feeling like you need a bit of exercise.
I actually read up on this because I thought, can you actually overwork your dough? But reading up on things, it's actually really hard to overwork your dough.
So if you're worried, overdo it.
Even
it's better to overdo it than
I'd
underdo
say you'll feel it like starting to change texture.
it. So what texture am I looking for?
So at this point, it's quite like it won't stretch. It'll break easily. You'll
Okay.
pull it and it'll just stretch easily because
There's no elastic in it. There's no gluten.
The gluten hasn't started to form yet.
Okay.
So you're waiting for the gluten to start to form, and it'll start to stretch. You'll see it just stretching more and more.
That's why you're stretching it in different directions, isn't it? You've got to make sure that you can give it a smack on the countertop. You can pull it apart and fold it back together.
Yeah, you'll see me pull it apart
You
in a
can
little
roll
while.
it around, as long as you're kind of stretching the dough out and making different shapes with it to make the gluten.
Absolutely.
We actually cut a bit of time out there because Paul was kneading for so long, so you saw it kind of transition. So yours might take a little bit longer than we do in this video.
Yeah. Another thing is you can add honey to your dough as well, because that's a nice flavour to add.
You've got to make sure it's only a small amount, haven't you?
Only a small amount. I go about a tablespoon.
Because if you add too much, it burns, right?
Yeah.
The sugar.
Absolutely. I mean, you can always add sugar. You can add some sugar as well instead of honey.
Right.
Because sometimes it's good to add a little bit of sweetness to your bread.
It also helps feed the yeast, doesn't it? So
Yeah,
it helps you to rise
absolutely.
a bit more.
I mean, maybe you should have added honey to this one.
And as you can see, I think this bread turns out lovely, by the way.
It does.
But as you can see, even with cutting some of the time out of the middle, Paul is still kneading here for quite some time. So it is really important that you knead a lot at this stage. If you don't feel like you've got the energy, maybe do it in pairs. One of you kneads for a while and then someone else
you can
does.
take it in bursts.
But the important thing is not to leave the dough sitting at this point until you're finished kneading. Don't leave it sitting on the side.
It won't turn out the way that you want it.
This is not the time for a cup of tea.
No.
Or to go and watch Neighbours.
No. So you can see now it's starting to stretch a bit more. The gluten's formed, it's not breaking easily, and you're just getting to pull it apart and
that's where you
fold it over
you can fold it
itself.
more.
It's starting to come together.
Oh,
Give it a little punch like that.
Bit of anger management there. Clearly you're having a bad day.
Always when making bread.
You can definitely see the change though. It almost looks bigger and it's stretching much more easily.
And you feel it's starting to get a little bit warm in your hands as well.
So that's not something we're avoiding on this one. Normally when we say we're handling our doughs, we don't want you to warm them up, but it's fine. If this one starts to feel warm, that's good.
Bread wants to be quite warm.
And once it's elastic and ready,
You want to just try and fold it in on itself so it's nice and silky on the top. Push your thumb in and you want it to bounce back.
that's how you know it's ready.
Yeah.
If you see it bounces back from when you press your thumb in,
And it's done.
And so you're tucking it under to make a nice tight ball. You're going to get a bowl,
You want to line the bowl with a bit of oil.
a little bit of oil. We had some oil in a smart water bottle, but Paul decided it didn't look good enough on camera.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Grab the
Olive oil, vegetable oil, whatever. You could technically use butter. We prefer to use oil though.
I think
It's easier.
vegetable oil is the ideal one
preferred.
because it hasn't got much flavour to it.
Yeah, you want a neutral oil.
Olive oil has got a little bit of flavour and you don't want that flavour. Unless
So-
you want it to be flavoured with olive, then go
It's
for
not
it.
going to get much flavour
No.
from this though, is it?
I mean, you can add some chilli flakes to it as well. Give it a little bit of spice.
To the dough,
To the dough.
you'd have to fold those in there, right?
Yeah. You can add
Not,
that
not
later.
at this point.
But you can add that in your second proof.
Okay, so we've oiled the bowl, we're covering it with cling film, and we're going to put this in a warm, dry place. Well, it doesn't have to be particularly
I think
dry.
I usually put it by the cooker.
Near the oven, or in whatever the warmest room in
Yeah.
your house is, that's where it wants to be. It doesn't want to be like sweating, but it just wants to be nice and warm. So Paul's
we
chucking
go.
it off to one side. How long did we leave it for?
I think we left it. This one was not as long as what I'd usually wanted to leave it for, but I think it was about 2 hours,
Cool.
roughly.
And we can see that it's grown a bit. It's not grown as much as we might have liked, but that's okay. This is bread. It does what it wants.
Yeah.
We're going to put
As
it
we
out,
found out between us this year.
and we're going to give it a bit of a knockback. So this is where you're just pushing some of the air out. And Paul's reshaping it
So you're
quite
just reshaping
aggressively, almost. Like, not everyone will be that confident with the dough. But just give it a squeeze, make it a ball again.
Yeah. So this time, because it's just like a rough, you're not making it into a loaf tin, it's just a ball of dough. So you want to make a tight form ball like that. So folding it in on itself again.
In and under.
In and under, yeah. And then you just want to oil your tray. So this time we're getting it ready for its second proof.
So at this point, when
this-
we're gonna oil the tray and leave it on here, but we're gonna make sure we preheat the oven to I think
220 at gas
or-
mark 7.
There you go, 220 gas mark 7. So throughout the second proof, that's when we're gonna be having the oven preheating.
And what I usually do is once I put the dough on here, is I'll put it on top of the oven. So it gets a little bit of heat and it helps it to rise.
That's it. So it's the
a little bit
perfect
more.
place. It'll be nice and warm, and it's ready to go. You like to dust the top of yours with flour.
I do, and I know it's just the point that you don't like.
I just think it's pointless.
I mean, also if you wanted to add some seeds on the top, you can do that as well.
Yeah.
Some sesame seeds, some little nigella seeds, anything like
Sunflower
that.
seeds, anything like that.
Absolutely. Just sprinkle them on the top, and as the dough is wet, and it'll suck them in slightly, and it'll stick to it.
Cool.
Don't add them after it's second proof because they'll just fall off. You want them at this stage.
There you go. So anything you're adding as a flavouring needs to be added. If you were doing chili like we mentioned earlier, you would add it while you were reshaping the dough.
Yeah.
To make sure that it's throughout the bread.
You could have also added some cheese.
Yeah.
You could have had cheese in the second proof and just fold it in slightly and then reshape it and put a
Cheese is a difficult one because you've got to make sure it doesn't burn.
Yeah, you don't want it on the outside, you want it more on the inside. Make sure it's really incorporated into
And there we go. We're ready for the second proof. It's going to sit on top of the cooker for a little
There
while.
we go.
And you're looking for what? Double in size?
Yeah, this again, it didn't rise as much as what I wanted, but I think because we were time constricted,
We
we just didn't have enough time to get it all perfectly done.
Yeah.
But it did rise quite a lot when it went into the oven.
So don't be disheartened. If yours doesn't rise as much as you think it will, it might turn out in the oven. So
As we've also found this year, bread can be a bit tricky. But
buy bread.
stick with it because it's well worth it, and as you can see, it's risen quite a lot.
It's looking beautiful there.
It is.
If it didn't have that silly flour on the top, it'd look even better. But there you go. So that's 220 for how long?
I think it was 20 to 25 minutes.
Right. And you just want to go until you got that golden brown colour in the crust.
But also, you want to, once you're taking it out, you want to tap it on the bottom.
Which
So you
you're
might
gonna-
want to use a tea towel like I'm using
You're
here.
going to see now. Paul's going to flip it over.
Yeah. And you just want to flick the bottom, and if it sounds like it's bouncing, the sound is bouncing back at you, it's more than ready.
You want it to sound hollow.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for.
You want a hollow sound.
You can knock on it, you can tap on it, and here we go. Look at this. That was the bread, and we're about to see it sliced. It's beautiful.
This
It's
was the
cooled
morning
now.
after.
It's completely cooled. You don't want to cook bread while it's still
No.
hot.
It'll go gooey inside because of the steam.
Here we go.
But it slices really nicely.
I mean, look at the crumb on this. It's absolutely beautiful.
It is.
Got some nice little
You can see
pockets
the
of
air.
air.
Yeah.
Nothing too dense, nothing too doughy. And then here we go for the glamour shot. This is always my favourite. It's a little bit out of focus at first. It's going to come into focus now.
But it did turn out
look
really
at
well, this
that.
bread.
Look at that.
So
And
keep-
I know for a fact it was consumed very happily by assistant.
Oh, within a day, it was gone.
It was gone.
Within minutes.
And this has been Baking with Paul and, well, voiceover with Jack.
Yeah, and please give this a go. It's well worth it. It's hard to do, but stick with it. Give it a go. Give it a few goes, and eventually you'll get it right, and it'll be. You won't turn back. You'll just love the bread.
Brilliant. And we'll see you next Tuesday. Tuesday
certainly
mornings,
will.
these videos are going to come on. Have a good week.
Thank you.